Hey guys, Jared Flinn with the BulkLoads Podcast. Tyler's with me.
What's going on?
We're almost 4th of July.
Yeah, I'm excited.
We talked about this on our last podcast, but we got these cool Richardson 112 trucker hats. I have not worn this yet, but...
Yeah, I haven't either. But
Are you going to be wearing yours on the 4th?
I am.
After the 4th?
Yeah. I've had a lot of people reach out about them too after our last episode. So if you haven't watched it, the last episode, go take a look at it. But we are going to talk about this more in the outro about how you can get one.
Be a great lake hat.
Yeah, I agree.
So, cool. Well, I'm excited about today's podcast. I'm just going to say this one, I'll just say this guy is the Einstein of trucking.
Yep.
I don't know if that's, I mean that in the most way, like the guru, genius, trucking and everything, economics related. I am speaking about Jesse Runions. I met Jesse last year. He came to the Bulk Freight Conference and got to meet him there and introduce himself. He is with BRB Trucking, Ben R. Brown Trucking. They're just down around the Joplin area. Jesse works on the accounting side for BRB. Before that, Jesse was a driver, drove for years behind the wheel. And we got to talking, and this guy, man, he just started talking about what's going on in trucking.
Yeah.
And Jesse knows everything from the operations side to the freight side. I mean, every aspect of trucking. And a couple months ago, we were down in his office, and I said, "Man, can you come up and shoot a recording?" And he's like, "I don't know about that," but I convinced him.
Yep.
And so, yeah, Jesse came up, and we shot this one. I think Jesse's going to be a regular on our podcast. I've had some other regulars on there, but I can see Jesse turning into that guy. He does just a massive amount of research on trucking and I guess business in general. I mean, there's things that he studies about the economy and currency and why we do what we do. And I could talk to him for hours on this stuff.
I remember whenever you brought him in here in the studio to do the episode, and he broke out a packet of information. I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be a good episode."
Yeah.
Just because he inserts his
prepared.
opinion, and what he thinks about it, but he has a lot of facts to back up what he's talking about, and sources and stuff.
This guy writes like papers on the state of trucking or the thesis, like in his spare time.
Yeah.
I say that I find that fascinating.
Yeah, he's just obsessed with it, and I think it's awesome.
I don't have the patience or brains to do that, but I want him to share that knowledge with you all on here. So we're gonna bring Jesse on here and talk about how we do that. So with that said, here's my conversation with Jesse Runions of Ben R. Brown Trucking. Jesse, thanks for coming in today.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, we met last year at the Bulk Freight Conference for the first time, and thank you for coming to that. By the way, it was awesome. It was just an awesome. I mean, I'm not bragging about the event, but it was awesome that everybody came.
It was a very awesome venue, and to see all the participants in the bulk community come together in one place, you don't see that.
No.
So it was very nice to see that.
But we had discussions there, and it was just last month. I was driving through your stomping grounds, and we just pulled in to talk. And man, we sat there, I think, for an hour just talking about the industry. And I think I asked you there, but then when I got home, I was like, "Hey, can you come and be on the podcast?" And you're a 417 guy. You're a little ways from here, probably an hour and a half out, but agreed to come up. But I'm excited to talk about this. I think there's a lot that we're going to unpack in this conversation, and you're going to lead more of the charge than I am. That's why you're here. You're the guest.
Well,
but this is going to be awesome.
The trucking industry is pretty exciting right now, if you want to call it that. And, the economy is turning the other direction, doing the great correction, as I call it.
Yeah.
So, we're going back to 2019. If you notice some trucking articles, that's the comparison point. The thing people forget, the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020 was actually a trucking recession. So freight rates then for van and reefer and flatbed were sporting as low as 90 cents per loaded mile. So, and today, the last average I seen a week ago, the average spot rate in van was $1.43.
I guess people don't think that far back. I mean, I think like, the ELD mandate, 17, 18, we had some rate corrections and people entering and exiting, but you're saying right before or right when?
Right as the pandemic is gearing up, that was the height, the pinnacle of the last freight recession.
Interesting. I want to keep talking about this, but I want to just peel back a little bit more. I want to go back and just talk about the history of BRB a little bit. Ben R. Brown, BRB, you guys have been members on our board since our inception, beginning, I think, going on now 13 years, been with us. So we thank you for being members with us. But just give us a high level for our listeners out there. I mean, a lot of our listeners are bulk haulers, hopper bottom running companies. But talk about just a little bit of history of BRB, kind of how Ben Brown got it started and kind of where they are today.
Ben Brown started in the 70s as a driver. And I cannot even think of the name of the company. Then his mentor started PDI trucking, and Benny essentially bought that from him. And in 1996, it became BRB, or Ben R. Brown Trucking. And we've been trucking ever since. We built a lot of close relationships with various customers, serving our immediate area. And then our main go-to lane is between the Joplin area to Texas and coming back. Bulk commodity hopper being the bread and butter, but we've dabbled in van and a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Okay. And how many trucks are in the fleet today?
Roughly 20 at any given time. We're not a big fleet. We're one of those exceptions to the rule. We've stayed the same size. We neither stagnated, but we've neither really expanded too much either. So.
And Ben, he was kind of the visionary of all that.
Yes, very much. He's hands-on, as we were discussing earlier.
Yeah, he was driving
this morning. He was going to pick up a load of wheat mids. It was a short haul, but he was out there doing it.
If you can credit, because I look at you all as you guys have weathered the times, and you've been the ups and downs, but you guys have stayed solid. And this is where the crux of this podcast is going to really relate to. But just what would you say where the successes has lied with BRB?
Having customers and the relationships built on trust, delivering consistent service each and every time. And when there is a problem, you spot it ahead of time and let that customer know, here's what we got going on. Here's what we're doing to recover the problem. Here's what our ETA is going to be now. Yeah. Making sure your customer is always in the conversation loop of what's going on with their product.
It's funny. I've preached that on previous podcasts, but even to our employees here, that number one is trust and number two is relationship. Somebody's like, they have to believe, they have to trust because most of us, unless any stranger you meet up, for the first time, there's already no trust established. So you have to build that trust. And then that constant relationship. Yeah, we're in a business where we serve people and there's transactions, but it can't feel transactional.
No. And I hope I'm not giving away a trade secret here. We don't have any contracts.
Yeah.
Everything is, built on relationships, trust. And two, a contract's only written or only worth the paper it's written on. A customer, rightfully so, has a lot of escape clauses that they have that they can activate at any time. And two, even if they didn't, as a carrier, would you want to stick them with the contract if they want to be out of it? If they found somebody cheaper, you gave them good service, they're coming back. You try to hold them to a service commitment, and they're not coming back.
No, yeah, and I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and I've realized that it was always surprising to me about the amount of business that's done without any contracts. They talk about the, contract rates and spot market, and especially in the grain industry. But I think as a whole, it seems like it's more revolves around, I wouldn't say necessarily spot, but just that obligation, like not physical written contracts on lanes.
Well, no matter what you're talking about, whether it's trucking, golf, what have you, all your deals, the best deals, are not done on a piece of paper. It's you and I talking. That's where you get the preferred rate. You go sell your cow at an auction, you walk in, you're a brand new customer. Somebody's been doing it for 10 years is going to get that better rate than the person that just walked in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Well, I wanted to give a little shout out and highlight to BRB because, again, man, we're thankful for being members with us. But, again, we look at them as a very successful company that has, again, weathered the storms, over the years. And it's always good to see those companies, but even to share a little bit of that success with others and others to be encouraged by that.
And we're all weathering one more.
So. Yeah, well, that's what we're going to talk about today. You have a lot of stats, and I think I want to talk about that a little bit. But first off, let's talk about kind of the state of the industry as far as rates go. When we were meeting last, we were talking about not necessarily in the bulk, but like the van reefer, it was this race to the bottom. And I love this analogy that you gave us about you and your buddy outrunning a bear. Give us that analogy and how it relates.
Well, trucking right now is like two fellows that run on a bear in the woods. They turn around, they run away from the bear. One of them stops, gets his tennis shoes out of the rucksack, puts them on. The guy stops. You can't outrun. He says, you can't outrun that bear. And he's like, no, but I can outrun you. And that's what every trucking company out there is looking to do. They're not looking to outrun the bear. They're looking to outrun everybody else. Yeah.
And we've seen this, and I've seen this several times in my career, but it's amazing that, again, we're 2023 and you're seeing, in some instances, less than $1 mile rates. I mean, this race to the bottom.
Well, even seeing that in Hopper right now, we had one load set that we've been right now in stiff times. You always plan ahead a week ahead, 10 days ahead, and try to make sure that your lane is lined up with your turnaround to come back to your home market. Friday last week, we had a load with a regular customer. The product wasn't forthcoming, so they had to cancel. So we line up another load, and I won't drop any names. That broker ghosted on us big time.
Oh, wow.
No contact, no nothing to tell us, hey, your load's canceled. Hey, the customer can't provide the product, nothing. Crickets chirping. And so this morning we're scrambling to find a load to get that truck back in market. And we were actually quoted a rate of $1.22 a loaded mile. In bulk, So
we're seeing some signs of.
And part of that, if you look in the truck paper and you look at hopper trailer prices.
Yeah, you
right
brought
now,
this up a couple weeks ago, which I found.
They're high.
Yeah.
And the reason why they're high,
that.
You got the people in reefer and van. We got some guys that migrated over, so they tell their buddies, hey, I'm making more money than ever, or more money than I did doing this, that, or the other. So they're like, well, I'm going to buy hopper. When word spreads, word of mouth, this is still the best form of advertisement. So right now, hopper is going through the same migration curve that reefer would go through when van goes in the tank. So you have this migration curve, van goes down, and usually it's the first, that or flatbed, and everybody runs to reefer because everybody's got to buy groceries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then, that's overpopulated, so the rates dive, and so, you got your gypsies looking for the next niche instead of riding it out. So now hopper is experiencing the same migratory, too many trucks and not enough freight curve, and then add to that, you got suppliers right now laying off, shutting down plants, and big ones. Tyson's just shut down 2 plants, one in Virginia, one in Van Buren, Arkansas.
Which is shocking to me but like chicken consumption's not going down, is it?
According to them, it is.
Okay. Interesting.
But it's actually in my
one of our notes.
sheet.
Okay. And that's what I was going to say. Yeah, Jesse gave me I tried to do as much prep as possible, but some of these stats that you've shown me, I'm like, first off, how did you find this? But it's pretty interesting stuff.
As I said, I don't have much of a social life. But yeah, right here, and this is from one of the niche strong brands. Things are not going well at Tyson, and they're talking about their big moves. And it's not really that things aren't going well. The consumer demand is dropping, even for chicken. And so Tyson is having to do right sizing. They're closing offices that are not, at least on the income statement, are not making an impact on the bottom line. So It's just like you and I, you got something that's not giving you a return on investment. You got to cut that spending, or it's not giving as big a return or future return. So they're having to do right sizing. Of course, that impacts us. We're one of the biggest players in the business. So,
back us up a little bit to we can just say interest rates, but kind of walk us through, because you wrote this report. I printed this off. 2 pages
in 21
in 2021, and I'm not boasting your ego, but a lot of this is spot on. Everything, but obviously you didn't know Ukraine was going to happen, the Russia deal, but everything else was kind of happening. But walk us through a little bit of the why. Why we're seeing what we're seeing.
Pandemic happens. So the federal government, to keep the economy going, pumps $2+ trillion of direct money in the economy. The Federal Reserve.
And they're doing that how?
Well, they did it, and the federal government did in SBA loans, EIDL loans, or emergency disaster loans.
And so a lot of those unforgivable, right?
Some of those
loans.
EIDL you had to pay back. SBO loans could be paid back, or if you used it all within a set time period, they forgave it as long as it was usable for what it was allocated for. And then the Federal Reserve loosening up the rates. The American financial system is a fractional reserve system. So the way they create money is, hey, we'll lower the interest rate, give the banks more money, quote unquote, to lend. And so actually the money grows out of the banking system. So now we're in reverse mode. There was too much money in the monetary supply. The Federal Reserve says, we need to raise rates, inflation, and higher prices.
Yep.
So they do that. Well, now the money supply, since they started raising rates, is roughly $2 trillion less than it was before that. So basically, all that money the federal government gave out, they pulled back in to get to right size the money supply. And the main reason of that is you have slowing economic activity, too much money chasing too few things, and prices automatically go up because you can get it.
Yeah.
And it works the same way for a can of energy drink as it does a loaded mile going down the road with a load of corn.
So are we in a recession right now?
It depends on which measure you use. In terms of you and me, regular, real people, absolutely. You go to the store, everything, real inflation, not what the Fed uses. You look at anything, it's probably 50% more if you have to eat it or actually use it. If you don't, like a TV set, now it's right the opposite. You can get it cheaper than it ever was because the retailers are overstocked of the non-necessities, but we all still have to eat.
Interesting. So I want to kind of keep talking on this and kind of how it relates to freight specifically. But so back us up a little bit more. Right now, we got this correction. Well, I guess I want to back up, but I want to go forward because I think more importantly, where do we see what's the future going to happen, or what's going to happen with specifically trucking in general, but even bulk trucking?
As I hate it when they say this in interviews. That's a good question, but it is a good question. What's going to happen between now and this time next year is more of the same.
So we're going to be same.
And the problem is we still got too many trucks. And so, hey, 21, 22, anybody that had the wherewithal to get their authority, get insurance through BulkLoads, what have you.
Yep.
Could get a truck, get a hopper, put it on the road, a van, reefer, what have you. And I forget what the total number of new registrants were, but it was close to 30 or 40,000, I think. So you had...
Yeah, because there's that stat, and we can pull the graph up, but it was showing 4,000 to 5,000 a month, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so that'd be about right. Yeah, you'd be in that 40-something.
So, and you could call and get a load wherever. You could pretty much command your rate. And because there weren't enough trucks to go around, because you had consumers with $2 trillion extra in their pocket. What do most people do when they got money in their pocket? It's burning a hole, as they say. So they were spending, be it Amazon eating a little more because they're stuck at home. And so you had all this, because everything goes around consumer demand. 70% of our economy rides on a truck. So
that's good.
More people are spending more money, you need more trucks. And as I said before, the beginning of the pandemic was actually the hiatus or the very peak of a freight recession where you had truck capacity bleeding off like crazy. So you had a shortage of trucks already at the beginning of the pandemic. And then when 21 comes around, there's a slight recovery, or actually a big recovery when you think about it in dollar terms. Everybody needs a truck.
You know, they talk about, a lot of these companies still talk about this driver shortage. Can't find drivers. Actually, this weekend I was up in Kansas City at a hotel, and we were in this little courtyard. Anyways, I was talking to this father. He was there with his kids, and he was a truck driver over in St. Louis. And they run this trucking outfit. They deliver kind of in the metro area. Anyways, make short story, he said they can't find drivers. He goes, their starting pay, and they work 4 days a week. It's 10 hours a day. So it's 4 10s or off 3 days. Starting pay $28.50. They can't find drivers. So what I'm asking here is, like, they talk about this shortage of drivers. Like, they can't find drivers, yet rates are down. Like, where's the disconnect?
Well, one, trucking, even in a local setting, is a demanding job. You got to get up 3, 4 o'clock in the morning or earlier to get that pickup, deliver. You're going to earn that 10 hours of pay. Get home 5 or 6 if everything's done right, and then get back up the next day for 4 days. That's a tough job, even though you're only working from the time you do your pre-trip to the time you do your post-trip. You're only doing maybe 10, 12 hours at the most. You're doing 10 or 12 hours of really arduous work. Even just driving the truck down the road back in 2007 or 8, I think it was the USDOT did a study, and they surmised that, be it your mirror sweeps, your gauges, looking for your fellow motorists, that the average driver made 160 adjustments per minute while driving.
Oh my
Be it lane
gosh.
corrections, because you think about it, from the steering wheel to everything else, shifting, braking. So, I mean, even though, he's sitting down, he's not doing much, that job is an arduous job. It's not easy. It's not for the faint-hearted. And then you talk about OTR, that's an aging demographic of the people who are willing to do it. The younger generation, in my opinion, are smart. They don't want to go out for 3 weeks at a time. They want to go home, enjoy family, the Xbox, the dog, whatever it is that they enjoy most of being in their home setting. And then they want to go to work. They don't want to stay out there and live in a truck, be in solitary confinement on 18 wheels.
So it's a hard thing to compare, because I'm comparing kind of two different markets. I mean, talking about a company driver, but it's really stop and go, multiple deliveries, probably a little more physically taxing versus that over the road driver on there. But again, you're still here. And I mean, me being in trucking, people ask me all the time that aren't in trucking, like, what about this truck driver shortage, and what are they going to do to replace these truck drivers? Like, what would your answer be?
Well, ultimately, technology is going to cure that. As much as we don't like it, no choice is one heck of a motivator. Eventually, you will see more, especially in the long haul lanes. You will see the self-driving trucks make a real debut.
Do you think we're in 2023. Do you think we're going to see that by 2030?
Easily.
The next 7 years?
If not sooner.
Really?
I think it's TU Simple and another one are doing FedEx loads between Houston and Dallas. I don't know if you've been on I-45. That's a very heavily trafficked roadway. And then Phoenix and somewhere else, I don't remember what
those are big roadways too.
Yeah,
like
heavily trafficked.
Lanes.
So they got faith in their software to put the truck on that route. And the one and hopefully I'm not misquoting, I think they did in one of those lanes, they actually let the truck do it unattended. I mean, they had chase cars and monitoring all around it. But, whether they had an attendant in there, they let that truck drive itself.
So I know, we have a big group, a lot of bulk trucking companies, and I could hear, some people like griping about that. And again, I understand because it's like, it's more technology. They're going to take away my job. I'm not going to be able to, but like if somebody's kind of fearful of that, like they don't want this technology coming, what would your response be?
Don't worry. Automation has been, quote unquote, been taking jobs since the inventing of the printing press. Cyrus McCormick invented the combine, or actually the thresher. What automation does is increase productivity. Will there be initial displacements? Yes. But the one thing human beings have over machines, I don't care how good their AI technology is, we can always find for lack of better words, a cheat, a shortcut, an innovation to get something done better. I mean, that's what automation is.
So what does that owner-operator do then?
The owner-operator is still going to be doing what he's doing, especially in bulk loads, be it hopper, pneumatic. You're not going to be able to replace the driver in that. They still have to get out. They still have to open that hopper door. They still have to hook up the hoses to the pneumatic. Whatever mode of bulk, you're still going to have a driver there. You don't have to have that driver line up the hopper door over the grate at a 100-year-old mill and make sure that the lip is in a certain way that when you open the door and you have heavy product, you don't clog the auger up. I don't see AI getting to that progression probably until 2050, 2070. We ain't going to have to worry about that. That'll be our kids and our grandkids.
I guess that's the biggest thing. It's more like, I don't think people are opposed to AI and technology, but it's the fear factor of like, what does this do? How am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to provide for my family? If this is all I've ever known, this is all I've ever done.
Like I say, I see that taking over companies that are challenged to fill OTR lanes, and not all the lanes. It'll be lanes, the hardest ones to fill. It'll be the 95 corridor. It'll be the I-5 corridor. It will not be I-35 between Kansas City and Oklahoma City. I mean, those are actual ideal pilot lanes, but those are not the lanes where they have a hard time getting people. Where automated trucks are going to be used is where, hey, where is it we're having a hard time getting affordable labor or even labor at all? So in that score, automation is not a threat to the American driver in that capacity. They're still going to no matter what mode of trucking you're talking about, they're still going to need that driver to do specialized things that a computer cannot yet.
Yeah. I guess they thought the internet was going to take away mail. And I mean, back when nobody's going to be mailing postcards, and I don't know, but maybe that's a poor example, but still people today still mail mailings. And
I think in the 1950s, Popular Science or Popular Mechanics did an article saying in the 2000s with the advent of computing that we would work 20-hour work weeks and have no paperwork whatsoever. The thing is, we work longer hours and we generate more paper than we ever have in the history of mankind because it's so easy. All automation is going to do, it will create change, but change is a constant in trucking anyway. I mean, be it the EPA regulations, ELD, what have you, trucking has always been confronted with changes that are not always been, considered very friendly to it.
Yeah.
And automation, no matter what form it takes, what lanes it tries to take in, it's going to be the same. There'll be those that adapt to change and flourish, those that resist it and eventually embrace it and flourish, and then those that say, no, I'm done, I'm out of this, I'm going to find something better. And the reality is when they find something better, they're probably going to be happier anyway.
Yeah. When I was visiting with you, I want to talk one more question on the not necessarily driver shortage, but workforce shortage that we have in the U.S. We started talking about that in your office, and I'm not going to say it over the camera, but you're saying basically we're not producing children.
Yes.
We're not having to get, I loved what you said better, but maybe it's stuck in my head.
We'll leave that off here.
Yeah, we're not having kids as much, so there's a shortage of workers out there, and you explained to me like technology's got to be the solution for this.
Probably not as bad in America, but we do have a declining birth rate, and I think it's either 2007 or 11. There were initial signs of it.
Why is that, by the way?
for the reason I explained in the office.
Well, people are still doing that though.
Yeah, but they're not going to home plate with it, so to speak, and they're not getting the point. But the countries that are going to be hardest hit is China, the People's Republic, and Japan already is. And Japan has an aging population. It has since World War II. When they had their great economic miracle, it wasn't because they had this population abundance. It was because they were relieved of providing a defense. So they had all these people they could throw in their workforce. And even then they had a shortage. You realize in Japan has the highest per capita vending machines, automated, analog, and digital, of any nation in the world. You know why that is? To free up workers to be in the actual production process.
They free up the workers in the production.
Yeah, so instead of a burger stand, you go to a vending machine, and some of them are pretty sophisticated. Some of them are like what you and I are familiar with.
Yeah.
And, that frees up a worker. And it'll be those innovations that'll have to be done to free up workers in our true productive processes to keep the country rolling. And think about it from the government standpoint. As with an aging population, you're losing taxpayers. They got to have something to go in there and make productivity that they can tax and get revenues off of. So I see AI and productivity coming in that direction too.
What about immigration?
Immigration is kind of
that's a hairy subject and you get sensitive.
It's a political football that's kicked on both sides. If they really wanted to fix it, they would have. The problem with immigration is Mexico has got a lot more economic activity, so there's not as big a need to go from Mexico to the United States when they can stay at home and make a living. It's normally what happened in, immigration. A few people would come up here from their family and they would send that money home to Mexico. Well, now there's enough activity there that money's already coming to Mexico. So you go where the money is. And if you don't have to go and fight the border patrol, rattlesnakes, and whatever else, coyotes, to do it, why do that? It's kind of like driving a truck. The newer generations, like, why would I want to stay out 3 weeks on the road? Same mentality for a border crossing. Why would I do that when, maybe I may not make as much on the gross, but I'm not paying, as much to stay in the shadows. And in the same, you look at Honduras, El Salvador, below it, even though you still have these migratory waves coming from there, a good portion of those, and Mexico has a tougher immigration policy than we do. When their quota allows it, the people from Honduras are not working in the United States, they're working in Mexico. Common language, closer to home, similar cultures. And it's for the same reason, money closer to home.
This isn't trucking related, but I loved your response when we met. Talk about, they talk about, the U.S. has a dominant currency, but there's fear we could be losing that we don't have the currency for I'm going to get this wrong, but world power currency. Like we're losing to, more and are adopting the Chinese yen and all that. But you were saying like, we don't need to be worried about that.
No, what's the worst thing that happens if we lose our dominant role? That means that Congress would have to balance the budget. We would have to live within our means. Would there be some fallout from that? Yes, but not as bad as people think.
Yeah, I guess if we were talking about the debt ceiling, what happens if
the debt
not
ceiling is more psychological too. The people that hurts most is you and I, the taxpayer.
What about all the funding that these government workers don't get paid? And I mean,
exactly.
Last week,
if you're non-essential, if you're not part of DHS in Department of Defense, you're not getting a paycheck, or your paycheck's going to be deferred. But those bills are still due. It just means they're not paying them right then until Congress makes a deal. We've been through that before. And my dad worked for the federal government through one of those, and so his paycheck was 2 weeks late until Congress worked a deal. And of course he got his back pay, what have you. So payments stop for, the people that have payments coming from the federal government, be it workers, entitlement recipients, contractors. Those will, and I say stop, they're being put on hold because those debts are still due. There's just no agreement to authorize the money, even though it's technically already been authorized in the allocation legislation, but there's this imaginary debt ceiling. But you're a bond holder, a treasury note holder, that's backed by the full faith and credence of the United States government. The Treasury, by law, if you want to redeem a Treasury note, they can't tell you, no, you can't. We got to redeem that if it's at the terms of the note. If you're trying to redeem it early, they can tell you no, but you got a 30-year, or 10-year, or 1-year T-note, and it's your redemption cycle, they have to back that up. Even if the debt ceiling, because that comes under a whole different category of law, the full faith and credence of the United States government. And that means, for lack of better words, hell or high water.
And I keep saying this, I see this, how high can the ceiling go?
Well, I don't know I'll be honest with you, I totally ignored the last negotiation. So I think they allowed it to go another 1.6 trillion. So I'll put it around 32, 33 trillion. And that's disturbing because our GDP probably will be around 22 to 24 trillion. So we're approaching the 150% mark of our GDP to debt. And the thought process of all the politicians, even the conservative guys, is that eventually the economy will grow and the revenues will grow us out of it. That has always been, It goes into modern monetary theory and all this other hocus pocus stuff. But the reality is that is a problem Congress and whatever administration, is sitting at whatever time, it needs to be fixed. It's been longstanding. It's no different than you and I. Even though they have the printing press, we are the reserve currency of choice. So if they want to print $100, we don't have to produce $100 activity. We just print it. That's something, that Europe, Asia have always griped about is, hey, you want 100, you just print it. If we want it, we have to make something to get for it. So exorbitant privilege is what Charles de Gaulle called it, and then somebody else too, but he's the most noteworthy one that called it that.
So we shouldn't be as alarmed as maybe it's perceived.
Well,
we have to be aware,
but what gives the dollar or a piece of gold, what gives it its value?
You asked me this, I remember.
Yes, your perception. So I'm gonna go buy gold, and that's great, but it only holds the value of what people think it holds.
It's interesting.
So all currency is fiat.
We got just a little bit of time here left, Jesse. I want to talk a little bit specifically to our audience, kind of where the market is right now, but we said that we're going to be in kind of this stale pace, maybe through 2024. And again, hopefully you can share. We want everybody to win. Like, we don't want the next person to go out of business to benefit somebody else, or I don't want to see that. What would be your advice to some of these trucking companies out there? They're not seeing the numbers they did last year. Hey, what do I need to do to make sure that I can keep moving, before I go out of business?
The biggest thing is manage your overhead. Every expenditure for your operation should be for the operation. And if you can streamline and cut costs, lowering rates means that if your overhead is too high, you're going out of business. So you have to cut your overhead. If you can't, you can't. You better have assets to trade for cash or liquidity to get you over the hump. Because my honest opinion is, and I hope to be wrong on this, is we will not see the turnaround till midpoint of next year. And it's not because we're going to have a big economic turnaround. It's going to be because enough trucks have dropped off the market where freight and capacity have equalized. Yep. And then rates will start gradually returning back upwards, probably end of 24, beginning of 25.
For some of those guys, and again, I'm not blind to know that, there's cheap loads that get posted on the board. They get advertised. And when the market's up, they go up. Market's down, they go down. But I know everybody's number is different, but what's that threshold to where, you mentioned that $1.20 mile freight. And did you guys haul that load or?
Absolutely not. We won't touch it.
And what's that threshold before you just say, hey, this if I haul this, all I'm doing is making the industry.
We try not to look at an individual load. We do, but we don't. Especially in times like these, we try to look at the whole load set. Mm-hmm. And so Depends on each, every driver is different, has a different set of fuel consumption.
And that's
habits.
what makes this challenging because everybody's number is different, and that load may work for somebody.
And we're
right?
a mix of owner operators and company drivers. We can dip our trucks a little lower than we can dip our owner operators. But then probably right now with fuel costs, I think it is around $3.71 this week on the national average. I'll have to look, or actually I have that up, but it's around the $3.70 mark for Midwest. So, and I say average, most of the places you can find a cheaper street price or go for the cost plus deals, mud flap.
Yep.
So the average cost per mile is probably hovering between the $2.25 to $2.50 mark, depending on miles per gallon. That's the biggest thing, fuel cost. And then your driver cost, if you got a driver in a truck, to give, a company driver, to give you an example, just paying them a modest living wage plus a per diem, offering insurance benefits that you subsidize a little bit, not a whole lot, just a little bit. Workman's comp, payroll taxes, you're spending upward above 80 cents a mile for a driver to drive that truck down the road. So just to load it or empty to go down the road, bare minimum, it's going to be about, I'll call it $2.40 midpoint. Wow. So when the rate goes lower than that, you're operating at a loss. And like I said, everybody's different. Some people we actually have one owner operator that's getting 8 miles to the gallon. He has a newer truck. He has a set set of habits that he has optimized his fuel mileage. You get 8 miles per gallon, that's cutting your fuel operating costs 40 cents a mile. So versus 5 miles a gallon at $3.70, what's that, roughly 70 cents? So it's a 30-cent cut per mile. So his operating margin he might could cut it to $2.10 if he had to. Who wants to do that? But when you're looking at survival and trying to get the truck back in the home market and not having a deadhead, then, but now time is money. Sometimes it's better to, what? I'm going to skip this load. I'm going to rush back to my home market. We're going to give it another go to see if I can get that complete loop at the rates that I'm used to. And we do that too. But everything is about overhead. If you're using the company as your personal checkbook, get ready.
This contraction you're talking about, it's needed. We have to get less trucks out there, for, rates to stabilize and to get back up. But then that's not necessarily like people going out of business. It's going to be some, but it could be just trimming your fleet back too, right?
Right.
Some of these people, they added.
A lot of fleets are already doing that. If you look at your bigger fleets, with the exception of Swift buying out U.S. Express, 7,000 trucks, if you can imagine that.
Crazy.
Most companies are looking at the age of their equipment, their turnover rates. Hey, do we need this equipment? But now the other side of that trap is used truck prices have fell through the bottom because new bigger fleets are refreshing these older trucks that they kept on the road longer. And now, hey, do I want to buy this truck at full price and their preferred price because they're buying, bulk, or keep spending the maintenance on this truck, and they're going to look on return on investment. And when you see the reflect, that's why you're seeing the Class 8 orders stay up, and even that's backlog orders.
Interesting.
So a truck that's being delivered today was actually probably ordered in October of last year.
So we just still haven't seen that rippling effect.
Right. And the actual sale for tax reasons really doesn't get reported until the money's collected. Until then, it's deferred income or even accounts receivable.
Yeah.
So it's not on your income statement per se, unless you really want it to be.
Yeah. Man, I've enjoyed this show. I know we kind of danced around. We talked about different topics, but this was the same conversation we had a month ago when I stopped in, kind of talking about these big things, and all these indirectly affect trucking in some shape or form. But I think these are the things I think about. I think listeners of this podcast are probably wondering the same thing.
I said 70% of the economy rides on the back of a truck. If you eat it, it's probably closer to 90% goes in a hopper, a pneumatic, edible tanker, a fish hauler.
Yep.
So if it's going on your table, it's closer to the 90% mark.
Well, I'm always biased, especially in, we're in two markets that are, trucking and ag, that people and animals have to eat or we're not going to survive, and we can provide that. So there's a little bit of stability there, but we know that there needs to be a little bit of a contraction.
Right.
Yeah. So awesome. Well, Jesse, hey, thanks again for making the drive up here, coming in our studio. Man, we appreciate you just taking the time and laying this out there for us. Any other last words before we jump off here?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. And hope to see you next year at the conference.
Likewise.
Yeah. Tyler, a couple of things that stood out to me, but when Jesse first talked about how they have zero contracts, I mean, I knew that ahead of time, but a lot of people don't realize, especially in bulk freight trucking, majority of these companies don't have a contract agreement with the company. Some do, but majority of them don't. But I think that speaks volume. He goes, they have performed the service to these companies where they don't need a contract. I mean, it's just as good as a handshake that you do with someone that said, hey, my handshakes is good. And I think that shows how great of a trucking company they are by not having that.
I think it's very rare to find these days people working off of contracts. It's like you can't find it anymore. That's why I like this industry, and I know why you love this industry is because it's a lot of good old boys who honor by their word and by their handshake.
Yeah, back in my Bartlett days when I started there and realized that, you called and the guy was set up with you, or you got his insurance, and you gave him the information, but there was no other agreement besides that. They got it done, and that's the way most of it's done, which I think is really good.
Yeah,
I think we pride ourselves at BulkLoads that we don't have contracts with our members.
Yep.
We don't make anybody sign a contract that they have to use us. We don't lock people into agreements. I should say not just BulkLoads, but for Smart Freight.
Yep.
A lot of our entities, we want to earn business and we want you to trust us. And that's why we don't make ridiculous contracts made by lawyers that you can't understand either way.
Yeah. And that's why I say we're seeing a lot of carriers move from these big factoring companies over to Smart Freight. And it's really been, we've seen that trend line go up just in the last couple months because guys are realizing that, they're locked into a contract and they have to move every single load through their factoring company. Where Smart Freight, we don't make you sign a contract or anything like that. And you get to pick and choose what loads you want to use Smart Freight for.
I was just talking to a guy recently, and he got set up with Smart Freight a year ago, and he's been able to grow from 0 to 6 trucks. And I'm not going to give it away, but I'm going to have him on my show too to talk about that. But one of those reasons was because he was using Smart Freight. He basically outsourced that part of his business, and it's allowed him to grow to have 6 trucks. He's not worried about cash flow and how he's going to get his money and all that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So, well, man, I love this. Jesse, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to bring you back. I speak with Jesse all the time, man. He's always sending me articles. I'm sending him articles. I mean, this guy, man, he's become a good friend. And again, thank you so much for that. Before we go, we got a couple more announcements. Man, the Bulk Freight Conference, we have dates on that for next year. We are excited about that. We're going to keep you in tune on that. But what are the dates?
Yep, April 24th through the 26th of 2024.
Yep.
And to get your name on a ticket, just go to bulkfreightconference.com. You can enter your email, and that'll get you on the list.
So we don't have tickets that you can buy right now. We will, but it's more save the date, kind of like a wedding invitation. Save this date, man. Put that on your calendar for next spring. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be bigger than last year. I think last year, so many people realized they missed out, and it wasn't by intention or design. It was our first one learning how to communicate it better out there. But we want to see you there. We're going to promote this a lot more, but early on I would say even 10 years ago, I probably wasn't as in tune with going to conferences, but I realized over the past 6-7 years how valuable that was, the power to network. You and I both know a lot of people we don't get to see, customers of ours, they're on the road. This is just kind of those industries where it's hard to meet. This is the place where you get to meet people. And I think, meet people you've never met before, maybe customers of yours, clients of yours, people you do business with, but other people in the industry. Iron sharpens iron. You're going to be with other truckers. You're going to learn other things. It's going to help you grow your business. And man, don't miss out. Take advantage.
Yep. I'm excited for it.
So anything else before we close out?
So we talked about the hats in the intro.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, these 4th of July hats, man, they're flying off the shelves. If you want one, simply send me a message, tyler@bulkloods.com. We'll pack you one up and send it to you in the mail. One thing you can also do for us is that if you can leave a review on our podcast, we'd greatly appreciate it. Leave a comment with us on YouTube, or simply go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and you can leave a 5-star rating or leave us a review. We'd greatly appreciate it.
When do we get to show off the summer shirts?
Let's plan next episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have some cool summer shirts too that we got to get that. We're in, I guess it's officially summer.
Yeah.
As this last week. But yeah, we got some really cool summer shirts that we'll send you free of charge too.
Yep.
And we'll let you know more about that. So, well, as always, thank you for listening to the BulkLoads Podcast. Man, we appreciate you. If you know other people that can benefit from this podcast, man, simply just share this out with them. We'd love to get this in the hands of other people that can benefit as well. Thank you very much. And as always, God bless.